You have navigated yourself from your country all the way here to a classroom, and you show up every day to learn. I know the dehumanization that they faced coming through. Almost like I'm seeing a physical representation of those journeys, and then thinking about the wall back home in Palestine.
We're here in Tucson. We're engaging in 2 days of professional development for educators to learn more about the inclusion of Palestine in an ethnic studies framework.
This workshop is a collaboration between the Chicanx Institute for Teaching and Organizing and the Teach Palestine project of the Middle East Children's Alliance.
Looking at the larger theme of settler colonialism from Turtle Island here to Palestine, and using that as a case study on how to integrate the concept of settler colonialism, decolonization in an ethnic studies curriculum.
And we're trying to show teachers who are teaching ethnic studies or want to teach ethnic studies why it's so important to root that in an understanding of settler colonialism.
And so we're doing some field work at the border. I think the power of being on the ground in a space where you can actually visually see and feel and hear border militarization and hear from people that are most impacted by that militarization, as well as some of the organizing that's happening to push back against that, and to see how settler colonialism still presents itself today, both as a theoretical concept, but also in the land, in educational spaces, and that experiential component really allows educators and participants to feel it, to have all of those senses brought up, so that hopefully they can bring that into their own classroom.
As you notice, Border Patrol's already been wandering around.
Being on the border,
Most likely not leave us alone.
the constant surveillance from the Border Patrol.
We're in Nogales, Arizona, U.S.
And the blimps watching us overhead, and all the cameras and the towers.
Engaging in that fieldwork is an opportunity to really be on the ground in community, learning from the folks that are most impacted by whatever it is that we're studying.
We'll be walking up that hill. At the top of the hill, you'll be able to see into Nogales, and you'll see there's flowers.
Jose Antonio Elena Rodriguez was standing across the street when he was shot and killed by a Border Patrol agent.
From maybe up a little bit higher, shot more than 10 times, hit him more than 10 times.
Authorities claim Jose Elena Rodriguez was throwing rocks at agents over the border fence.
¿Cómo? ¿En dónde? ¿Quién? ¿Por qué?
But medical examiners say Jose was shot as many as 11 times, with all but one of the bullets striking from behind.
The bullets went into his back. People down there were throwing rocks in such a way that they felt their life was in danger.
Jose Elena Rodriguez was standing in a sovereign country, in a foreign country in Mexico. We have agreements with Mexico where we're not supposed to fire our weapons into that country.
Taide Elena, Jose Antonio's grandmother,
Todo esto ha sido una experiencia muy dura.
says Mexico is corrupt, but the United States isn't far behind.
Of course, Jose Antonio is one of many shot and killed by the Border Patrol over the years.
The constraints of our educational spaces oftentimes don't allow us to engage in field work unless you're in an institution, that has a mechanism to do that. And even in our K-12 sector, actually doing experiential ed, learning from the community, redefining who are the experts.
This last year was the most people who died ever.
The folks that we were learning from, a journalist,
Was 856.
and also from the O'odham Nation.
Being Aboriginal to the land, obviously, for thousands of years, there was no distinction between, the border is just like an arbitrary line.
When we're talking about decolonizing our teaching or decolonizing anything, we really need to obviously start with the land.
Pre-contact times, I guess you'll call it. The O'odham used to just travel back and forth along all the way from, like Phoenix to Mexico City.
Embedded in there is, of course, an analysis of capitalism and how that impacts settler colonialism, climate change, border militarization. And so if we're going to start with the land, we need to also, have those themes and topics embedded.
There's a lot of areas that there's virtually no border. I mean, you couldn't even tell like what country you're in.
I know my students' stories, but then seeing it, like, it's just a whole other level. It's hard, right? Like, you just think about all the resilience, and we always talk about, community and cultural wealth, and how do you bring that into spaces, and are we bringing that into the space in the program I run?
It's really different to see there, to be on the ground, to talk to the actual people who are affected.
I lost count a long time ago, how many times, like, physically, I've been either punched, grabbed.
And I always tell people, you can read about stuff and it can impact you deeply, but then you see it, right?
A lot of traumatic stuff, a lot of violent, a lot of being yelled at, screamed at, threatened.
I work with many students who have traversed from Central America here. And even though, I was thinking about that border wall yesterday in a different context, in the context of the work we're doing this weekend, I couldn't help but make those connections.
We know who you are, we know what you're doing.
I know the dehumanization that they faced coming through, and I know what it was like in the detention center. So it's almost like I'm seeing a physical representation of those journeys.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not doing anything illegal.
And then thinking about the wall back home in Palestine. I was there this summer.
Oh yeah, you are. You know what you're doing. We know who you are.
It makes so much sense to compare it to settler colonialism in Palestine.
This tower is an integrated fixed tower, IFT. The tower is equipped with all these cameras, really sophisticated cameras that can see at least 7.5 miles, but I'm hearing from Border Patrol that it's even 8 or 9 or 10.
In my experience, it's been really illuminating for students that things like criminalization of youth, forced displacement, buried history that you're trying to reclaim. When you look at what's happening in Palestine, kids are always like, oh, that really reminds me of what happened to my tia, that's like our story.
No one's free until we're all free.
I am the daughter of Palestinian immigrants, and I am raising fully blooded Palestinian children.
Being in solidarity with Palestine in particular, and what's happening there, particularly right now.
And then how do we remain hopeful? And I guess that's this work, right? Teaching, teachers, being in community with educators, and then activists.
Educators right now, whether they're high school teachers or university professors, they can integrate Palestine into their curriculum to bring awareness.
End of the day, anyone who's willing to do this work and is bringing this work into the classroom is an activist.
And to hopefully bring more attention and solidarity to the movement to freeing Palestine.
We actually had dreamed up this kind of workshop a few years ago, but because of the pandemic, ended up having to do it online.
I feel really inspired and humbled by the experience.
So the fact that we are able to finally come and do it in person in Tucson is so exciting.
I think being here and being able to talk to each other is going to be really important.
Just can't wait to see what they develop and how they're going to network with us and each other. I feel like it's just planting the seeds that that will grow into something really beautiful.